Do you own a winery? Survey says you need to focus on your DTC, direct to consumer. We're going to get to that. The New York State updates an old alcohol law. Will this open the gates to some sanity? One can hope. Young people, will you ever drink wine? Yes, you will. Yes, you will. We'll explain. All that and more on this episode of This Week Uncorked. Hello and welcome to episode 50 of This Week Uncorked for Monday, June 30th, 2025. I'm Brett Martin from Cork and Journey, your number one source for Corkage Fees, wine reviews, winery reviews, restaurant reviews, and more. I am in Florence, Italy right now. I don't know how that looks behind me. We've had tasted some great wine, having some fun, but tell you what, let's get right on into the news. So Silicon Valley Bank, they have a fantastic wine team over there that they do loans to wineries, and they've been around a while. We've referred to them in the past. They just released their 2025 direct-to-consumer DTC Wine Report. It's here. The bottom line is that, number of wineries are growing and shrinking. Sales are kind of growing in certain areas and shrinking, mostly shrinking. But at the end of the day, most of the wine being sold, if you're kind of in that 10,000 cases and below, 20,000, most of your wine is being sold direct to consumer. Over 73% on average is direct to consumer. This is a 70-page report, and it's a really, really interesting. If you own a winery, trying to figure out how to stay afloat, how to stay in business, how to get your wine out to consumers, this is worth reading. I do want to highlight of the 70 slides in this, I'd like to talk about a couple, slide 14 and slide 16. So we'll start with slide 14 here. It says the proportion of regional direct-to-consumer sales. So Santa Barbara, 79% of all the wineries direct-to-consumer. Paso Robles, 78%. The average across the entire country, 73%. Napa, 68%. That shocks me. Oregon, 67%. Sonoma, 66%. The rest of California, 66%. But what it really gets down to is the annual direct-to-consumer share in case production. So if you're a winery that makes 25 to 50,000 cases, you're basically 60% of your sales are still direct-to-consumer. That's still a pretty decent-sized winery. Now you start getting into the big guys, it drops off. So the 100,000 case plus guys, they're doing about 31%. Last year, it was only, that's in 2024. In 2023, it was only 19%. So 81% of their stuff was being sold in restaurants, being sold in supermarkets, liquor stores, whatever. Now it's 69% is being sold there. 31% is actually being sold direct to consumer. And man, if you're a little guy, we already know this, your entire business is dependent upon your ability to attract consumers, get them into your wine club, and sell directly to them. 10,000 cases and less, it's pretty much about 80% of your business or more. Anyway, the mid-range starts to drop off, but still a significant amount of business is direct to consumer. So this is a big focus. This is an interesting article, a lot of talk in here around, should you lower your tasting fees? What can you do to attract people? All of those kind of things. And at the end of the day, well worth taking a look at this, especially if you own a winery or in the wine business and you're trying to figure out how to stay afloat. Take a look. On other news, direct-to-consumer and craziness, the Times-Union, which I'm assuming is a publication out of New York State, has an article, Legislature approves retail-to-retail alcohol sales. What does this mean? We oftentimes talk about the crazy laws that govern alcohol in the United States. Well, this is one that I've known about, but it's really interesting that it's kind of being brought up and hopefully addressed here. So here's the bottom line. You own a bar, you own a restaurant, and magically you run out of gin. I actually was in a Mexican restaurant a couple of years ago and I asked for a gin and tonic and they said, oh, we're out of gin. My wife actually asked for a Cadillac margarita and they were out of Grand Marnier. Whole other story, poorly run restaurant, I guess. But the bottom line is legally you couldn't go to the supermarket across the street and buy a bottle of gin and bring it to your restaurant and serve it. That's illegal in New York, or was. But now a new bill has been passed. From the article, while the effect may not be especially visible to the public, advocates say the change helps bars and restaurants, many of which currently rely on weekly or bi-monthly delivery from wholesalers, to avoid disappointing customers by running out of a product It would also legalize a not uncommon practice that can result in fines of $1,500 or more if the state liquor authority catches a violator. The bill permits businesses licensed for on-premise alcohol consumption to buy up to 6 bottles per week of wine and or spirits from an off-premises licensee, a liquor store, a supermarket, anyone who's allowed to sell alcohol. Crazy, but that's the way it is. Anyway, hopefully some of these laws get changed, makes it easier on restaurants, makes it easier on everybody. Also in many of these cases, we've talked about it, we're talking about direct-to-consumer. Wineries can sell direct-to-consumer, but they can't sell direct-to-restaurant in a lot of cases. I mean, depends on where you are and what the laws are. Anyway, enough of that. Before we move on with the news, quick promo for us, Cork and Journey. If you're going to a restaurant, you're saying, you know what? I wonder what the Corkage Fee is. Well, you need to check us out because we have the #1 database for all Corkage fees. And if you basically go there, type in the restaurant name, type in the city you're in, give it a radius. We will give you restaurants, Google reviews associated with them, and basically tell you what their Corkage Fee is and what their regulations are around that particular Corkage Fee. So check it out. It's all over at corkandjourney.com. All right, moving on with the news. So Wine Searcher has a long read on navigating wine's new benchmark regions. This is kind of a crazy read because it covers everything, like who's drinking wine, who's not drinking wine, what's popular in wine, what's not popular, what regions are in favor, which regions are out of favor. And sometimes this has absolutely nothing to do with the quality of wine or whatever. It just happens to be super trendy. In a lot of cases, though, it does have to do with the quality of wine. So Kathleen Wilcox, writing for Wine Searcher, examines how shifting consumer values, climate pressures, and pricing volatility are redefining what we consider the world's benchmark wine regions. It's kind of a really interesting piece, looks forward, kind of highlights the rise of the new global standouts, the big ones, Bordeaux, Champagne, Burgundy, Napa, they're still the big four, but things are changing and there's some really cool regions. You can think of Mendoza, you can think of Marlborough, think of maybe Sicily now and what's happening down Etna, the Finger Lakes district in New York. There's all kinds of crazy little areas that are jumping up. This kind of goes through them, but quickly from the article, for many regions that are on their way to becoming benchmark material, remoteness in geography, tempered by a relaxed approach to hospitality, read the opposite approach of a typical wine regions, is also a big factor. Perhaps counterintuitively, amid an era of declining visitorship to major wine regions, being difficult to get to can make a place seem more destination-worthy. These regions also showcase a more diverse range of grapes and styles and a more accessible price point. Okay, it's hard to get. People want it. But anyway, this really does talk about a lot of the new up-and-coming regions, and we've talked about it with climate change and what's going on. Is the England the new Champagne region? A lot of people would suggest it is. Anyway, we'll wrap up the news with the Wine Enthusiast podcast, who has an article/podcast. So it's kind of like maybe a 500-600 word article that feeds into their podcast entitled, Will Gen Z Ever Drink Wine? As I said at the top of the show, yes, they will. Seems like their love of wine comes later in life for all generations, at least in the United States. Over here in Italy, I've seen like 5-year-olds drinking wine, so I guess they start young. Maybe that's good. Maybe it's bad. I'm not going to judge. But anyway, from the article, in 1998, New York Times said, young people 21 to 29 years old are turning away from wine. For the $13 billion a year wine industry, the loss of so many potential customers couldn't come at a worse time. That was 1998, so 27 years ago. And a lot of people who are drinking wine now were in that generation. Then again, in 2016, the New York Post ran a headline, Millennials are ruining the American wine industry. And now if you fast forward to the current generational panic in the wine industry, this time it's Gen Z, 13 to 29-year-old. They're saying, oh my God, they're not going to drink wine. If history does anything, proves anything, eventually it seems the older you get, maybe the more your palate matures, maybe the more you understand things, maybe you have more expendable income. Anyway, generation after generation turns back to wine. Reminds me of a marketing seminar I was at several years ago where they were talking about, man, I'll tell you what, these kids today, they just don't work hard. Our country's doomed because the kids don't work hard. And then the speaker went back to the 1800s from newspaper articles about how the generation today, you know what, we're doomed because they don't work hard. generation after generation after generation, and it all tends to work out at the end. I think eventually the little 13-year-olds that we're worried about to 29-year-olds will eventually maybe start drinking wine. Who knows? And with that, let's move on to our wine and winery of the week. All right, we're going to go to Lompoc. That's right. We've got to wrap up the Lompoc area, I believe. One last time, but we were down there at the wine ghetto and we visited Flying Goat Cellars. These are interesting. We were talking earlier about how wine regions are moving and, sparkling is moving to England, and we're seeing a lot of great stuff coming out of there. Well, these guys are known for their sparkling wines as well and doing some really, really interesting stuff there. Again, it's in that wine ghetto, just that industrial complex. So you're bopping around from winery to winery. If you're there, they are one worth checking out. They've got really cool logo and a great T-shirt with a flying goat, and their wines are pretty good too. So, when you're over dark water, you can just walk across over the Flying Goat, check them out, enjoy it. I think we've covered a lot of them there. We've given you some highlights of ones you should see when you are down in Lompoc. Anyway, check them out. And for our wine of the week, going to go to a 2016 Pinot Gris Grand Cru Florimont. Man, this is from Alsace. It is killer, 95 points, $54. It's from the Moss. It's just beautiful. You've got to check it out. It's kind of beautiful amber hue. Anyway, this is one of those, Pinot Gris, kind of usually take it or leave it, but man, I like it, but I've never really been blown away. This one kind of blew both of us away. So check that out. I think you can pick it up probably over at Kermit Lynch. Not sure, but that would be my guess as a good place to start. And with that, let's get to our restaurant and Corkage of the week. All right. In Bloom, Paso Robles, a blossoming culinary gem. See what we did there with that title? It's kind of a cool little place. We stumbled in it. Very casual, kind of modern, open-air concept, main drag, Paso. Don't have a Michelin star, kind of going for a Michelin star is my guess. Maybe they got one since we were last there. Only opened in 2022. They're right there on Spring Street, so just down the street from La Petite Canales and all of those great little places that you can eat at in Paso. This was all kind of fresh, locally sourced stuff, farm to table. Very, very good. Expensive. Yeah, definitely on the pricey side. We liked it a lot and definitely one to check out. Las Petite Canales, definitely, if you can get into Sam's Kitchen, you want to do that. In Bloom would definitely be on the list. Anyway, this is one of those, if you're down in Paso, check it out. It was featured in the Michelin Guide in 2022 and 2023. And Wine Spectator has loved their wine list as well. 2023 and 2024, they highlighted it with their Award of Excellence. So if you were down there, check it out. And not only do they have a great wine list, but their Corkage Fee, $40 per bottle. Not that bad for a restaurant of this status and this stature. Anyway, and it's a 2-bottle max. All right, that is going to wrap it up for another episode of This Week Uncorked. Cheers, everyone. I have to say, we're having a good trip, man. Some of the reviews and some of the places we've got for you to visit if you're in Italy, those will be coming out soon. We've just had everybody's been absolutely wonderful. Everywhere we've been, down in we're in Tuscany now, but we were down in Amalfi and checked out a couple wineries down there. Interesting stuff that they're doing down there. And then here in Tuscany, really doing some great stuff as well. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up. And as always, we would love it if you would subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. Follow us on all your favorite social media apps, all those kind of things. Hey, everybody, thank you so much, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.